The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there and welcome to the show. It's brought to you in association with Levi's Solicitors, who will offer you a 10% discount on your legal fees. levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. That is on services for you personally and for your business as well. Here with Moscow White in the studio, there's an empty chair between us. Let's stare longingly at the empty chair.
Who is going to talk about the big three?
Michael.
Me.
There he
Me.
is. He's there, look.
I'm going to do it, aren't I, from here? From at home, all stood up and that.
Why are you at home stood up? Explain.
Broke my back, Anna. Well, that's not quite true.
It's a bit dramatic.
I've slipped a disc in my back, and sitting down is very painful. So I'm doing this from home so I can remain stood up.
The good news from our point of view is that this injury was not incurred at work, and therefore we don't need to talk to Levi's Solicitors about it.
No negligence was there involved?
No.
Although we are booking you in for a call with HR. There is a meeting next week with HR to address your absence, if that's okay. HR being me in Moscow.
We need a doctor's note, don't we?
Michael, say the thing about the 15%.
You can get 15% off, can't you, on the big three? If you listen to Phil Hay Monday Club, you did one of them, didn't you?
We did on Tuesday.
Yep. Yeah. So who's been shirking now, eh? You, just 'cause it was your birthday. Pathetic.
Anyway, yeah, 15% off Will's Probate Conveyancing for a limited time. Have a watch or listen to the Monday Club for details of that. I'd say it's lovely to have you back, Michael, but it's not really. Just grim tolerance. How did you consume our relegation? Because this is the relegation special. Ta-da. Closing out the season with this. Talk us through it from your point of view, Normanton.
I was laid in bed, wasn't I? It was quite relaxing in a way because we let Spurs score nice and early. So that just took all the tension out of the game, didn't it? It was just like, okay, lovely. Just sit here and endure the rest of this. Second half, I think, to be honest, it was one of those where I was looking at my phone for half of it because you just sort of, the game's gone, hasn't it? Nothing was happening. I think as soon as there were no changes and then Spurs scored straight away at the start of the second half, it was just boring, wasn't it? Just waiting for the season to end, which is what I feel like I've been doing for quite some time.
Scrooge is in the comments saying it was a fitting end to the season. Can I say F words on this show?
I believe so.
Flipping rubbish is what he said. Now, fucking rubbish. You knew that was coming. Chernobyl was less of a disaster than these last 2 years. Seal me up in concrete and stay 2 miles away. There you go. It's been a poor end to the season. It's been a poor season. I think everyone's a bit tired, and that is reflected in the feedback we've had from our TSB Plus members. We're going to hear from them throughout these shows just to let us know how they are down on relegation.
The last few months have felt like a relationship that is kind of coming to the end. And I felt a lot of relief Sunday afternoon. And then by Sunday night, it was kind of regrets of the things that could have been and missing it. And then coming to the realisation that come the end of the summer bowl, I'll be ready to start again, but with a heap of trust issues. Fucking club.
I guess that just summed up the season, didn't it? Fucking hell, we're terrible. I mean, just useless. It's like watching pinball. When you bring in on Firpo with 20 minutes to go to try and save the game, just can only hope that next year some of these kids get a chance. Archie Gray, get back some of the lone players, see how we can do. But let's just take the summer off and have a rest, and give ourselves, before we all have a heart attack. Oh, and one last thing. Dan, happy birthday for tomorrow for both of us.
Oh, what a debacle. This is my fourth relegation. What is wrong with this club? This club is in the top 5 or 6 clubs size-wise in England, and it's global. This is just inexcusable. Anyway, back to my whiskey, Johnny Walker Red. Fuck me.
It's been coming all season, really. Relegation's been on the cards for a long time now. Still pisses you off when it happens, but there's that sense of apathy and burn it all down, and we're the ones that are left to pick it back up again in the Championship. Just what a waste of everything we achieved under Bielsa. Terrible.
My first Leeds United memory is the 75 European Cup final. And at 7 years old, I remember the hot tears of impotent rage pouring down my cheeks as I asked my town supporting dad why, and shouting, "It's not fair." And it's been downhill ever since, to be honest, with a few highlights. Yes, I'm not even that bothered, really, to be honest. In comparison, it's just more of the same. But still, what a fucking season, eh?
There you go. What a season, eh? Where does this sit in your all-time list of disappointments?
It was interesting, the guy who mentioned that we've had 4 relegations, or he's been through 4 relegations, is an interesting one, because before the weekend I looked at, I compared us to Norwich. So we've been relegated 4 times since 1960. Norwich have been relegated 6 times since we were last relegated in 2004 from the Premier League. So I don't know if it's because I wonder how it feels as a Norwich fan. First of all, knowing that you had Luciano Becchio at your club and you never saw the best of him, that was great. But whether that is a better or worse feeling than being relegated 6 times in the last 20 years, do you just get used to it? Because I think with us only being, I know we went down to League One, which was a historical first. We'd never done that. But we're kind of, it's unusual for us to be relegated. It just doesn't feel that way. But then, yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to, I don't know what you asked me.
How does it sit in your list of all-time disappointments? I tend to lean into this one has barely scratched the surface compared to, I mean, most of our failure has been failure trying to get up again, hasn't it? When you think about it, like playoff disappointments, things like that, losing in cup semi-finals or even finals sometimes.
And oddly, that's something I was kind of looking forward to when I was thinking about it this morning. That if we do go down to the we are going down to the Championship.
Don't know if you've heard.
Yeah, apparently that's the news. If we don't come straight back up, presumably we'll have some kind of attempt at promotion. I don't think we're going, famous last words, straight through down to League One again. And we didn't last time. It took a while. But, if we don't go up next season, then the season after is another promotion. A promotion push is exciting, isn't it? But are they ultimately more upsetting if you don't achieve them than relegation? I don't know. Where does losing to Doncaster in the playoffs compare to what happened this weekend?
I mean, that was my dad's birthday, by the way, that one, I think. If it wasn't that one, it was definitely the Watford one, one of the two. We've been blessed by having late May birthdays, and similarly with you, Michael, as well. Where does this sit with you?
Oh, it's fine, isn't it? It's been coming for so long. It wasn't. I think the fact it wasn't a relegation battle made it easier to take. I think it'd have been harder to go down last year. I'd have been more upset by that because it felt like we were in with a chance on the last day. Whereas this, it was just coming for such a long time. It was weird that it was still in our hands really at West Ham because that feels so long ago now that I don't know. It's almost not entered into my mind that we did have it in us to fix this because we haven't looked like we had it in us to fix it since halftime at Crystal Palace. It's just been absolutely miserable for the past month or so, hasn't it? So we don't really do relegation battles, do we? We just go down. Like if you think about I don't remember the first one, but I remember 2004 and then down to League One. Both of those cases, we just kind of went. It didn't feel like there was a real clinging on or anything. And obviously, by the time we went to League One, we also did it with a massive points deduction as well. So I think had we made a fist of it, like if you're in the situation of Leicester, you're probably more upset by this after the weekend because at some point they looked like they were staying up and then they didn't. Whereas we, early intention, nope, put our hands up. We'll say, yeah, we'll be the first to go down today. Don't worry about it. You just fight out between yourselves.
I suppose as well with how long it took to get relegated, it's kind of one of the big fears of coming up to the Premier League was that we just end up like Norwich or some mid-table also ranks who maybe turn into a yo-yo club and just become another run-of-the-mill club. And that was kind of how I felt when we sacked Bielsa, was like, well, that's it now. From now on, we just get normal managers and we just have normal players playing normal football. And it's kind of, we either win or we lose. And it's like, it's a bit nah. We'd lost something that kind of marked us as separate to the Premier League humdrum, at least made us give us something that stood apart, that we were doing something different. So I was probably a lot of the frustration and the anger of like kind of what the club was about to become, I probably got through on my angry walk from the Spurs game to drinking in the station to then going home. Like a lot of it then was just like, well, felt almost, and it sounds very dramatic, but it felt like relegation. And you probably saw more people crying around Elland Road and up at Thorpe Arch on the day Bielsa was sacked and the days afterwards than you did when we were relegated, which maybe says something about him, but then also says something about how I think for a lot of people, what has happened since kind of felt possible from that moment. And so now it's come to pass. It's kind of like, well, yeah, I did all this.
I think as well, part of it is maybe, and it's touched upon in the clips there, about how we view ourselves. And I think I've spoken before about this, about the idea that because of how Leeds United have kind of sawtoothed, rollercoastered up and down through the divisions across the years, and we've flirted with real success. Obviously, we won the league. We did the Champions League thing, and we were title contenders, 20, 25 years ago, whatever it might have been.
Oh, well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the Champions League run, yeah. So each generation as it's passed has had something within its recent living memory to think we should be doing a lot better than this. So it's set the bar quite high. And the person on the clip there who was saying, potentially top 5 or 6 in the country and we've got a global appeal. That's kind of, it's all legacy stuff, is that, isn't it, now, versus the reality of the Premier League. And I think we've kind of butted up against the reality of it. We've found that. Yeah,
the reality of Leeds is that there are people, when we were promoted, who had never seen Leeds play in the Premier League because they weren't born. And, I think I need to do the maths, but I think let's see, in my lifetime, Leeds have been in the 2nd or 3rd division more than they've been in the top tier.
Same, yeah.
And so it's we're coming a lot further away, and I think that's part of some of the pressure at the club is that assumption that we belong at the top, and the more that time goes by, the more that the seasons stack up when we're not even in the top division, the harder it becomes to make that argument in a way that means anything to anybody apart from to ourselves. And there's probably, we are the club that won the European Cup in 1975 in our imaginations, but expects everybody to behave as if that is true.
Is it not?
Well, exactly. So it's,
my dad always says it when I'm chatting to my dad in Elland Road, talking about this. And it's just like, I've seen the best team in the world. I grew up watching the best team in the world. And then we won the league title again in the 90s. And then, we did the Champions League thing. And it's just seeing it fall off to such an extent, as you say, passing time.
And even if you take it over the 100 and what is it now, 104 years in total, the first... like one of the things when I wrote a book, 100 Years of Leeds United.
Out of date now, isn't it?
Available on our website. No, it's still very much in date. It ends on a happy note, so it's probably never been a better time to buy it if you want some cheering up. But one of the things I wanted to do with that was find out what actually happened before Don Revie took over the club, because apart from the John Charles story that everybody knew about, the main stand had burnt down with all the club records inside it. So there was very little information about that period around.
I heard you just made it up though, didn't you? That's what you were saying to us before.
It was, just got it all off Wikipedia. And but there was up until 1962 when Don Revie took over, and 1964 when we got into the first division, didn't win a damn thing. We were a yo-yo club in the 20s. We were sort of mid-table, but I guess we were a little bit Crystal Palace-y now in the 1930s when we're like getting a good young team together and might do something. But then Second World War happened, and then post-war, basically nothing, trying to get out of Division 2 for years. So there's only the periods of time when Leeds United have been as good as we think they are and have been the club that we all think they are quite brief. Like the 10 years, 1964 to 1974, and then Wilkinson, 89 to, like, if you say his glory was 92. So 3 years, 3 seasons, and then the Champions League era, what was that, 2 seasons when we were really good. And the rest of the time it has probably been, before Revie, nobody gave a toss, really. Nobody cared about Leeds having a good football team. It didn't matter. And then the rest of the time from Revie leaving until probably now is people going, how do we get back to what Revie did here?
It's all kind of untapped potential, isn't it? The way I view Leeds United is that we have so much capability and we're constantly striving to be better and making arguments towards the owners and the board and the executives or whoever it might be that things should be better than you are serving up for us.
Well, that's the other thing is like what I'm talking about there was the league status, but we've always been one club city in one of the biggest cities in the whole United Kingdom. And, you know, if Manchester can have two clubs at the top of the Premier League, we should surely be able to manage one somewhere near it. What that would mean if somebody could actually pull it off, if we could have the 60,000 capacity stadium, if we could have the global brand recognition that Andrea Radrizzani thought cartoon saluting badge was going to deliver.
The headless figure.
Yep, then it would make a very big difference to the club. And it's all there to be done. Like, it should be pretty easy to make Leeds United as good as we as fans imagine it to be and think it should be. Just some people seem to have a very good knack of making it look really difficult.
Where's our natural home then, Michael? And where would our fan base be happy being, do you think?
I think that's why it's important we've had a little taste of the Premier League again, and a new generation has got to have a little go of it as well. Because I feel like for a long time under Bates and Cellino, there was a shrinking of the club, and it was almost pushed upon us that this was acceptable. That okay, well the South Stand's shut, the East Stand up is shut. We don't sell that many season tickets. Yes, it's expensive. You need to be grateful for what you've got here. I do think it's important that we've had a little glimpse of the promised land here, so we can at least. So now there's maybe a higher standard of accountability for people, and people will hopefully demand that. Because part of the depressing thing in those years was that the number of people who would essentially support the idea that it was fine to be in League One, it was fine to be in the Championship, and it never was, as far as I was concerned. And it felt like there was always potential there for us to get out. And when we did get out, there was potential for us to go much bigger. And it seemed we were going to do that for a little bit, didn't it? But it was a mirage, as it turned out. But I mean, I will say, the comparison to the 2004, 2007 relegations, this is a completely different scenario. We've not got the complete meltdown we had in those years. We're coming down from the Premier League the first time. We'd already sold half the good players. It was clear anyone who was left who was saleable would be sold, and the money for them would essentially just disappear into a black hole. Likewise, going down to League One, it was with administration attached and Bates still taking over and points deductions and all this sort of stuff. So there was never any real cause for optimism for after either of those relegations. Whereas this, we don't need to make it another period in the wilderness. We can just come straight back up. We can be, in this scenario at least, we can be Norwich.
Yeah, we'll kind of get on to what comes next, I think, because that is part of the big question about how this feels. We'll do that in due course. However, to reflect on this season, Jake has sent us a really handy metaphor.
I have been a Leeds fan since 2006, I know. Terrific timing, and this season has somehow ended up being one of the least enjoyable, including all the championship and all the League One years. It's as if Bielsa and the promotion team built this beautiful cake with delightful finishings and just a great taste. And over the last 2 years, the board has taken their turn taking shit all over the fucking cake. And now we're standing here 2 years later with this shit-filled cake, and the board of directors is looking at the fans like, we don't know who did this. Who shit on the cake? And everyone's looking at them like, you shit on the cake. It was you. No one wants these fucking toppings.
A great big cake of shit.
Jake needs to find a new baker, doesn't he?
I would say so.
He's being ripped off.
Is it a big cake of shit? I've reflected on this. Is the metaphor fully accurate? I wonder if they went to the shop and bought something that they were told was icing. They told the rest of us it was icing, but when they wanged it on the cake, it turned out not to be icing. It maybe was a bit whiffy. Is that anywhere near a passable metaphor?
Victor also can't tell the difference between
cake and shit.
Cake and shit. Is that the basic argument? I mean, to say it's one of the worst years, he's right. I mean, I'm just looking down a list now of Leeds United seasons, and 7 wins. You have to go back to 1947 for a season with fewer wins in it. So it's pretty depressing, isn't it? I know the level matters, but the reason League One was fun sometimes was that we won most weeks.
And for context, 1947 So it was 46, 47. You're talking about that's
Yeah.
the first year after the Second World War when a large number of the squad had died in the war, and others were 8 years older and were injured from fighting. And then there was a bunch of kids, and they put Willis Edwards in charge at the start of the season, who was kind of a sentimental appointment. It was a classic knows the club kind of thing. And then within a month, they were trying to get rid of him. So it's one of the all-time absolute worst seasons in Leeds United's history for lots of reasons. They just did a very bad job, of coming back after wartime. And that's about the level that we've managed to achieve in 2023. Yeah. I wonder what Big Sam would have done in that situation.
6 defenders.
Yeah.
Although we did get the old big shit cake, if we are going to run with this one, at least they did have the foresight to build in the wage drops into contracts, because as Michael was saying earlier on, we're not on the edge of a cliff, I don't think. There are obviously a lot of transfer fees due in the next 12, 24 months. And I guess we can move forward and talk about Radrizzani's takeover of Sampdoria, because that's the big looming thing, isn't it? Is what comes next.
Well, I think the position we're in, it's kind of a weird double-edged sword, because you'd think if we'd pushed the boat out maybe and signed some more players, then we wouldn't be in this mess. But the mess that we are in, because we haven't done those kind of things, we weren't risking, and it's kind of annoying that Everton got away with it, but with that half-built stadium on the dock that's going to cost them $500 million, and the players, like their FFP, there's a hair's breadth between them and points deductions and fines and all the stuff going on. On the one hand, the club has been run well enough to steer clear of all those things, but then and so we're in a pretty decent position for going down. But then on the other side of that is that maybe if there had been a bit riskier, maybe we wouldn't be getting relegated now if the boat had been pushed out further. But then the third hand is £35 million for Jorginho Rutter. Feels like one of those. Maybe if we just carried on doing that. That's the thing. If we like a bunch of those kind of signings, really would have sunk us. That does look like a big tanking the club purchase. So on the one hand, if we'd bought more £35 million players like Rodrigo de Paul, maybe we would have been we'd have a better team. But if we'd bought lots of £35 million players and they'd all been Jorginho Rutter, then things would be even worse. But yeah, I guess the situation we're in, and that caution as well, whether it was like, and the goalposts seemed to move, but it was, the percentage chance of going down in the first 2 years, then became the percentage chance, the risk of going down in the first 3. Running the club with that in mind does at least mean that we're landing in the Championship with the potential to become Norwich. And that's probably, it's the sense, and it's also the pain of it. It's like when Victor Orta got a lot of grief a while ago for saying in one of his last interviews, as while he was working for Leeds, that qualifying for the Conference League now would be as big an achievement as getting to the semi-finals of the Champions League was. And it felt like that. It's a real, it's part of what we've been talking about so far. It's all kind of pin in the balloon of our pride, but it's probably also quite true that the outlooks for us, we're relegated from the Premier League, but it's not like we're losing the chance of winning it, which is what we lost when we got relegated in 2004. 2 seasons before, we'd been in the Champions League semi-final. We'd been top of the league in the calendar year. It was the calendar year 2000, wasn't it? Where if the season had run January to December, we would have waltzed the league ahead of Arsenal and Scum and other like really strong teams at the time. So it felt at that point like we'd somehow gone from the opportunity to be champions to the Championship. Whereas now it's a little bit like we've gone from the opportunity of being Crystal Palace and finishing 12th, or Aston Villa and getting in the Conference League, to the Championship. So it's part of that and with the condition that the club appears to be in, and with the parachute payments, and with without a transfer market collapse that just ruined Peter Ridsdale, if you listen to his version of the story, around us with a lot of players who should be worth enough money to keep us to cover the future transfer fees and all that kind of stuff. It's been sensibly run down.
Yeah, either to the point, it's either the cure or the cause, one of the two, isn't it? Villa's an interesting example, actually, just looking at the table, because they got in the Conference League and they have scored almost. They're on 61 points. We were on 31, twice as many points as us over the course of the season. They were below us when they sacked Gerrard. Goes to show what decision making and poor decision making where it leads you.
It's mad as well, and I always use Villa as the example as well. I mean, they hired Gerrard in the first place, so they're not that bright.
No. But it goes to show you're always one bad or one good move away from transforming a lot of what it is that you do. Where do you sit on Radrizzani and the ownership, Michael, and the whole Sampdoria thing? As we speak on, it's Wednesday lunchtime as we record this. We know that deal has gone through at their end, but we still had not a single word about Leeds.
I think the relegation obviously has tarnished his legacy anyway, as of the way that things have generally been run. But his complete disappearance as we go down, I think is what most people will end up remembering him for, which is, in some ways, it's a shame for him because you can point to several things he did that were very good, but to have completely disappeared now, I mean, to look at the statements I was digging out from last year when we stayed up, his name was all over the statement on the website, and there were promises about, improving the squad and delivering the performances we deserve, and we're going to be not doing this again. Essentially, this year there's a nameless statement on there saying soz about that, and it doesn't quite cut it. And it feels like he's the man who will he's happy to bring out the trophy onto the pitch. He's happy to be at Salem Chapel, putting his plaque up with his name on. But then when stuff's gone wrong, where is he? He's in Genoa trying to buy another club. And it feels like he has essentially washed his hands of us this year, which is fine, but do it properly and give ownership over to someone else, because I think this has hampered us this season in general, is the split ownership thing. We saw in January the almost sale of Jack Harrison, the buying of Ruter, but with the fee pushed on for someone else to pay, essentially. And it feels like that has been an inoperable model for a club, to have someone who knows they're getting out essentially committing to buy stuff that they're not going to have to pay for.
Where do you sit on the 49ers, Moscow? And is it time for them to break their silence, or do you understand their silence, given that they've been trying to deal with Andrea Radrizzani, and as it stands at the minute, trying to complete a deal to buy Leeds?
It seems like the current silence from everybody must, I hope, at least as a consequence of things happening. That's because they're doing stuff, nobody can talk about stuff, and them not being at the game on Sunday either. It's interesting, nobody was there. It's just Angus Kinnear is there. And whether it's everybody just felt that because we're between two ownerships and this is going on, that it's appropriate for nobody to be there, that's how it came about. Maybe I don't know, they're going to have to, if they're coming in, they're going to have to start communicating quickly. I'm prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt over the last few years, because I wonder, and it sounds like from the bits you hear about, like stopping Jack Harrison being sold and all these kind of things, that they perhaps regret not taking over sooner as well. I think a lot goes, I keep thinking of the end of season awards when we finished 9th, when there was 10,000 people allowed into Elland Road, and Ellie Goulding was there, and there was the awards afterwards, and Pete Lowry was there, the 49ers were there, Radrizzani's there, everybody's they had the interviews set up outside the hall, they had the squad look together, you saw Rafinha was telling loads of jokes, which I think was the first time we'd really, because they'd all been hidden away during COVID, you'd only really seen them play football, and then you suddenly saw the players kind of
being human.
Yeah, you saw them in the civvies, and you're like, oh, like they seem like a great bunch of lads, and lots going on. And I remember Pete Lowry in particular sort of sitting there talking about growing up as a Leeds fan in the 1970s in Australia and listening to commentaries on the transistor radio, and everybody seemed really happy about everything. And it seemed like there's so much. You had the moment there where all the money is in the building at once, and we had Bielsa as well, at that point, who was then apparently that summer is when he's saying it's changed me or changed the players' time, and how it went from this big, that feels like an opportunity for somebody to say, either Radrizzani to say, right, I've taken this as far as I can, let's you guys take it from here, or for the 49ers enterprises to say, we really think we can take this forward now, you need to go into a more minor role, and then Bielsa to be saying, you need to take these actions if we're going to build on finishing ninth, and this is how we go forward, whether it's with me or whether it's with somebody else, and how you take the squad forward. And it seems like from that, they went to the sort of near 50-50 ownership with Radrizzani still in charge. And I wonder, and I kind of hope that Parag, Morate and Co and Pete Lowry are looking back at that moment and going, we should have just bought him out. But then,
but you also need to have somebody who's willing to sell. That's the other side to this. And it doesn't sound like he's necessarily been ready to give up the reins, does it?
Let's say perhaps they look back and wish he had. Yeah, it's the same thing. They wish he had been willing to sell. He hadn't been such a. I mean, we don't know if he was obstructive or not. But it comes to the same thing. They will probably look back at that moment and wish there had been a way of buying him out instead of trying to do it now when you hope he's. On the one hand, it's cheaper. So that's good. And if you bring it back to the Premier League, then your profits are going to be even bigger when you sell it on, if it all works out. But then, hopefully the process of buying from him now will be easier. If there's enough people around who still have in mind, we were ninth, we can get back there.
Very much so. And if it is a 49ers future, it will start next season by the looks of it. Here are some thoughts of TSB Plus members looking ahead to next year.
We don't know who's going to be playing for us. We don't know who the coach is going to be. We don't know who the director of football is going to be. We don't even know who's going to own the bloody club. And already I see Leeds fans online shitting on the championship. And it just makes me think, seriously, guys, give it a week before we start pretending that we're any better than any of the teams down there. I feel like a dose of humility might actually help us bounce straight back up to the Premier League. And who knows, maybe even stay there this time.
Someone please tell me I'm wrong. I just can't get on board with the hope I'm seeing on Twitter, particularly around players that we're going to retain. Let's say we entice Vauber and Adams to stay. Even that assumption is flawed at the moment because we have no idea who's going to be in charge and what direction the club is going in from a footballing perspective. Tell me I'm wrong, but I can see at least 12 or 13 players out the gap.
All right, lads, still hungover. Jesus Christ. Talk is Big Sam's in discussions to stay on next year, and I'm telling you now, if we go into that season with Big Sam in charge and Bamford up top, we're finishing 9th at best. Over and out.
This can't come as a huge surprise. I mean, this isn't really shocking. You've been terrible for about a year and a half, and you guys have been talking for some time about how the club and players need kind of a reset. I kind of agree with that. A lot of those players look tired and beaten. Some of them look like they were never really interested in being there to begin with. And I got to say, as much as we don't want to admit it, the championship has players that inspire us. Like, we'll have players like Botaka, who inspired Moscow to get a life-size face tattoo of him on his chest. It'll be good. We go again, Leeds.
Sweet, sweet Jordan. The hubris was one of the things mentioned right back at the start of that clip. I'm all for the hubris. I don't know about you. What do you reckon? It's what makes football, isn't it? I want us to go into that division, swinging our dicks around saying, we're going to fill your grounds for you, we're going to walk this division, and if we don't, then people throw it back in our faces, because that's what makes life interesting, doesn't it?
I would like to back it up with actually building a good side as well, rather than just saying it. I mean, that is important to say. I did actually get a tweet from the Wolves account, Wolves Fancast, as soon as we were relegated, saying, what are you saying now? And I was like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I was disappointed with the lack of blowback on it. We got a bit from, because I think when Sheffield United went down 2 years ago, I tweeted out from the Square Ball account, off you pop then, something like that. And they got picked up on. And to be fair, you've got to credit them for holding on to that grudge for 2 years until they were up and we've gone down. And it's like, oh, well, it's only a tweet, isn't it? It doesn't matter. I did the cowards thing and deleted it as well because I thought, I can't be arsed getting loads more of this. But they even still, I was just kind of, it's fine. I don't really care. So I'm all for hubris. What about you, Moscow, and your Jordan Botaka tattoo?
I've not really been looking at Twitter, so I don't know.
But how do you feel about the Championship? Do you look at it and you think we should be going into it and dominating that league, or do we have to have a dose of humility, or can the two coexist?
I just think there's too many games. So I look at with the Championship as I just see looming 46 fixtures. And that's what I hated about it before. I don't care who we play. I'm quite, Plymouth will be interesting. There's, we can sneer at local rivalries, but what the hell? It's kind of fun playing Huddersfield, isn't it? Sheffield Wednesday coming up, the Barry Bannon reunion. There's a little bit more to it than, Man City coming round and seeming bored about just waltzing the league and angry about the FA complaining about them cheating. At least a rivalry with Huddersfield is kind of based on the fact that we're next door to each other, so it's a bit more tangible. But that's all fine. But what I was really, really detested about the Championship last time we were in it was just the sheer number of games.
It's relentless, isn't it?
It just goes on and on and on too long, and things can drag. Like, what really was painful about being in it before was getting to like middle of March and we can't go up and we can't go down, and there's still 3 more months of the bastard thing to go. That's the thing that worries me more than being laughed at by other clubs, or losing to Plymouth away or something. That's fine. That's all football stuff. But just like 3 months of pointless matches in the second tier is no good whatsoever.
It's different to 3 months of pointless matches in the Premier League, isn't it?
Give us a good old-fashioned relegation battle if we can't go up. That's what I say.
It's those double game weeks where you've got, because occasionally you get 2 home games on the bounce, don't you? You've got you're in March, there's nothing to play for. You're there on a Saturday, and then you think, fucking hell, I've got to do this again on Tuesday. Just come and watch another meaningless game that the players aren't asked about and I'm not asked about, but here we go, all the same.
Everyone is kind of assuming, though, that it won't be nothingness. Everyone's assuming that there's going to be a challenge in there, aren't they? That's how I sort of generally read it.
I mean, it should be. We spent years in there complaining how that we had no chance of getting out because everyone else had parachute payments. And other than that, we always had the biggest revenue pretty much, didn't we? The last set of accounts showed all the big commercial revenues and stuff. A lot of that will stay. I know some of it won't, but some of the commercial benefits will hang around for a bit. So we've got that, and we've got parachute payments. We've probably going to have like the biggest turnover of any Championship club ever, more or less, next season. I would imagine, because the ground will be sold out pretty much every week, I would say, as long as things are going fairly well. So there is literally not an excuse next year. Just get up and stop being idiots about it.
Yeah, that's one thing I woke up thinking about this morning about Leeds United, that we've been sold the line so often that everything is such a monumental struggle that we've started to believe it, and we've started to kind of identify with that and think it is kind of baked into our identity. And it's something I think when you spoke to Victor Orta, maybe was it you spoke to him, Moscow, when you did that interview, or was it when we did the podcast with him? Either way, it's words that have come out of his mouth when he was talking about Leeds fans and the kind of the heavy shoulders and the idea that we'll always fuck it up. It doesn't genuinely have to be like that, does it? That's the thing. We need to shed that skin.
I remember, he was saying that in the podcast.
That was the
version
podcast,
of that. He was talking about how he'd it's handed down from grandfather to father to son that Leeds always mess it up at the end. And it's like, well, looks like they were right, Victor. But the other side of that is, and I was thinking about it when I was listening to the Phil Hay Monday Club, and you and him talking about how there is just Angus Kinnear in the building now, although we do now know that Andrea Law, the furniture salesman who Massimo Cellino's wife took a liking to in Miami, is now in charge of our recruitment department. So that's he's having an incredible career. That guy, I hope he's good at it. He's stayed for 8 years working behind the scenes, so I think he must be pretty good at whatever it is he's doing. But anyway, it does now. The club has come down to it's just Angus Kinnear on his own, give or take. And I think that's a sign that it's not only on the pitch that we've missed an opportunity here, but off the pitch as well. Why is there only Angus Kinnear there? Why isn't there a proper setup behind the scenes? And when Angus was in here being interviewed, and some of the things he would say, I think I've mentioned this before, he'd always say that we didn't understand how expensive some things were to do. They were talking about it with the stadium recently, where everybody was complaining on Twitter because Michael was being a smart ass and unleashed a torrent of people pointing out all the things that they hated about the state of the stadium. And the stock response, it was in the notes of the supporters advisory board meeting, is basically Angus Kinnear saying, well, people just don't realise how much it would cost to sort all these things out. And I was thinking, well, you've got all the Premier League riches in the world. You just spent £35 million on Jorginho Rutter. There's money. Spend that money and fix it. Don't just keep bleating on. And it was always about, it was with the women's team was one when and it was going back a long time. We're still in the Championship, so it made some sense at that point. But he was like, oh, you don't, it's like the running costs of that. I mean, there's only so much that we can do. It's like, okay, well, we're in the Premier League now, so where's the investment in that? Because you've got that money now, and if it's and if you need administrators behind the scenes, if you need a bigger staff, why aren't they there? Yeah. And these things cost peanuts compared to what you spend on a footballer. And the budget just never seems to have filled in these gaps that there's the examples of how Arsenal have a commercial department with like 200 people working there. They must all be doing stuff that makes money. And then Leeds have a commercial department with like 10. So imagine if you multiplied our commercial department by 20, how good it could be, what could be happening, and how much more capable the club would be, how much more money they would be bringing in. And all those things never seem to have happened because there seems to be like this setup cost that they're really feared of. It's, oh, well, it would cost a lot of money if we were to do that kind of thing. It's
well,
like,
the irony is, I think
would help.
What Kinnear would say probably, and I can't put words in his mouth, but I would, based on our interactions with him over the last couple of years, he would say that the focus upon coming back up was all on the pitch. It was all. It was
both.
Well, they identified the first couple of years back up, they needed to go at it quite aggressively with footballers. And that's the irony, contained within it, is that it's actually cost us our Premier League status them doing that. If
you hired more people, you would have people who could concentrate on other things as well. So it could be that having one chief executive in charge of so many different things means, yes, you have to focus on the pitch or off the pitch. But if you bring in more people around you, they can help do the other stuff. And it's the stadium is there's been money for certain things, because I mean the West Stand is always like, it's a point of contention that it's on the verge of falling down, it's horrible, and there are bits in it that are pretty dire, but the bits where Radrizzani and Kinnear and co all spend their match days are absolutely beautiful. They're lovely. Plenty of money has been spent there to make that part of the stadium spotless and modern and as good as it could possibly be. But we need to concentrate on the pitch. When it comes to sorting out the northeast corner or something, we need to concentrate on the pitch. But the club would be would perhaps be having, I wonder if Angus is looking around his office at all the empty desks surrounding him, thinking I could probably do with some help here, maybe. And there will be a point with the general inertia of the split ownership as well, of like who is responsible for building out the departments that turn Leeds into a Premier League club. But it's right across the board where you see things not being posted on social media because the social media person, singular, is away. It's kind of, why aren't there more of? I was going to say a lot of Premier League teams have media departments, for example, of 12 strong. There's a team of people doing the various platforms and stuff. Anyway, and it's long been said. And I don't think it's saying anything offensive about the people who are doing the work there. They're working as hard as they can.
Yeah, in that the infrastructure's not there, and it's probably still a Championship club behind the scenes.
And that's I think it's worth presenting that as another missed opportunity of being in the Premier League, is that we're kind of going back to the Championship with so much of the club just looking the same, and it's physically manifested in the way that none of the building work is really started on the stadium, certainly not the expansion, but then that's kind of stands for some of the stuff behind the scenes where that hasn't moved forward in the way that it could do, or it could have done.
Some of this is that some of this is for the new owners to do as well, isn't it? And I would hope that the 49ers, I know 49ers investment isn't the 49ers, but there's certainly overlap of people, and you would hope that they would come into Leeds. I mean, to be truthful, I would hope they would have already done this, but it hasn't happened. But you would think they would look at it and go, well, we have like hundreds of people doing all these things. Why don't you? The fact we haven't yet is a bit weird. I would almost think, I would almost have thought they might have insisted upon it and have, bring in teams of people to do these things. It feels like we've maybe they're just treading water until the ownership changes, when they can go, actually, no, we want to bring our own people into this. We don't want to have to consult with someone else as to who does this job. The first thing they do, they may get rid of Angus Cadet. It might be the first thing they do. They might be like, thank God we're in charge. We can get rid of this guy. All of a sudden, complaining about the giving his excuses about why toilets are not clean. But it feels like there's a huge amount of scope there, and they surely cannot look at the administrative side of Leeds and think this is of an elite level.
It brings us back to what Moscow was saying about maybe when Radrizzani should have cashed out, and should this have been done 2 years ago, because the long tail on this takeover has probably hindered a lot of progress in terms of putting that structure in, because you would imagine, wouldn't you, that they're going to look at it with, regardless of what you think of them as a sporting organisation, they're going to put in a robust structure, aren't they? Surely, because that's what you do if you're sensible.
And if you're Radrizzani, if your aim has always been to get this thing sold, the most important element of that is maintaining Premier League status. So maybe stuff that you look at that you would invest in if you're going to be here for 10 years, the stuff you look at is very different than if you're going to be here for 1 year, isn't it? So your investment's completely changed. The fact is we've invested a fair bit in players who are fairly terrible, unfortunately. So that's why we've gone down. But you can kind of see from his point of view why he would want to do that, and maybe why certain areas have been neglected.
But that's where, and a lot of this comes back to this confusion, and it's where the split. It's not just split ownership, because Aston Villa are owned by about 4 different people who all, and like their CEO is joint owner, and like so they are equally confused in terms of who does what. And Crystal Palace as well, they have one of their co-owners is wanting to build a network of clubs, and then their other co-owner isn't wanting to do that, and so how much money they spend on transfers. So we're not unique in this, but what has been difficult to take from our point of view is if you take Angus Kinnear, if you take Andrea Radrizzani talking to The Athletic last summer, where he's still talking in terms of getting into Europe over the next few seasons. But then at the same time, The Athletic had reported, well, he's got a deal in place to sell the club by January 2024. So, and then Victor Orta's doing interviews as well, saying like, yeah, we hope that this season we're going to finish 12th to 14th, and then we'll go for 10th to 12th, and then we move, and then we, the year after that, we get top half, and then we establish our top half. So you're all going in 18 months, according to everything that we're hearing. If the 49ers buy another 7% of the club, you could all be out, certainly, and Radrizzani being the main one, where it's like, you've got a deal to sell this in 18 months. So what am I supposed to do with you talking about 3 years in the future and where the club is going to be, because you aren't even planning to be here? And then if you take that, how that cascades from the top of the club down throughout it all, where it is just like, well, should we hire some more people to do this? It's like, well, don't know if they'll want them in 18 months because the boss is off. And it's kind of, oh no, but he also says that we're going to be doing this. And that confusion and that lack of, there's 2 Jesse Marshisms that are very appropriate that he's absolutely right to use, where he says clarity, everybody needs to have clarity about what they're doing, be really clear about what they're doing, and alignment, where everybody needs to be aligned on exactly what they're doing. And it feels like since we finished 9th, nobody has really understood what is happening next, how long people are going to be here, when somebody else is going to buy it, what is going to be happening on the pitch. And certainly, I was saying the other week that it felt like when Bielsa got sacked, and then they've got this plan for Marsh, but too much of that felt like just getting rid of Bielsa was then going to solve a lot of the problems that they thought they had, and it didn't really seem to work out that way. And having put so much into thinking Jesse Marsh would be the long-term answer for talking to him for 2 years or whatever, once that didn't happen, they were just, the swiftness with which Marsh turned up after Bielsa was never replicated once they got rid of Marsh, because the nearer you get to the deadline of the 49ers apparently buying it out, I suppose the hazier ideas and plans become. So, they fucked it really.
Well, that brings us round to the playing side. So we will pause there, end of part one of the relegation discussion. We're going to talk in part two about the playing side. The fact that Junior Firpo, Robin Koch, Brendan Aronson and Patrick Bamford were named in the statistically worst team of the season by SofaScore. And maybe try and figure out a way forward with our Player of the Year award that we've been talking about on the weekly show, because the numbers are in and we're not quite sure what to do with them, so we need your help with it. So look out for that in your audio and video feed as well. It'll be along shortly. We'll see you soon.
The Square Ball Podcast.